The Galactic Federation University of Natural Sciences prided itself on three things: its prestigious xenobiology program, its diverse student body representing over 700 species from across the known universe, and its strict safety protocols that had prevented any major incidents for the past 247 standard cycles. Today, all three of these points of pride were about to be severely tested by one Sarah Martinez, the institution's first and only human student. "You know they're going to expel you this time, right?" my roommate ZX Vika chittered nervously, all six of her compound eyes fixed on the suspiciously large container I was attempting to smuggle into our dorm room. The arthropodian's antennae twitched with anxiety, which I found ironically amusing given what was in the box. "Please," I scoffed, carefully setting down my precious cargo. "They're not going to expel their token Deathworlder. We're worth way too many diversity points in the intergalactic rankings," I grinned, showing what I knew was an unnervingly large number of teeth by most species standards. "Besides, this is for educational purposes." ZX Vika's mandibles clicked in. What I'd learned was the arthropodian equivalent of an eye roll. "That's what you said about the honey badger incident?" "Okay, first of all," I held up a finger. Mr. Cuddles was completely contained the entire time. "It's not my fault Professor Yeloth decided to phase through the containment field without reading the warning signs. And second," another finger joined the first, "nobody got hurt. The professor spent 3 weeks in a regeneration tank." "Like I said, nobody got hurt." "Permanently," I waved dismissively. "Besides, this is different. Today's specimen is completely harmless. By Earth standards." The way ZX Vika's entire exoskeleton paled at the phrase Earth standards was absolutely priceless. In the 2 years I'd spent at GFU, I'd learned that those two words could clear a room faster than an actual antimatter breach. Sarah, my roommate, began slowly, as if explaining something to a particularly dense child. "Your species considers beings that can literally breathe fire. Cute pets. Your definition of harmless needs serious calibration." "Dragons aren't real, ZX Vika," I sighed, though I had to admit I enjoyed playing up Earth's reputation sometimes. "And bearded dragons don't actually breathe fire, usually." A small whimper escaped my roommate's spiracles. "Anyway," I continued cheerfully, checking the time on my holopad, "I should head to class. Don't want to be late for my presentation." "Wait," ZX Vika called after me as I headed for the door. "What exactly is in that container?" I paused in the doorway, grinning over my shoulder. "Let's just say it's something that would feel right at home in your family tree. Very, very distant family tree." The sound of ZX Vika's distressed clicking followed me down the hallway. The walk to the xenobiology lecture hall was entertaining as always. Being the only human on campus meant I never had to fight through crowds. They parted automatically, like some kind of Moses in the Red Sea situation, except instead of water it was terrified aliens trying to maintain what they considered a safe distance from the crazy Deathworlder. I'd gotten used to the whispers and stares over the past couple of years. The rumors about humans had gotten increasingly ridiculous apparently. Someone had started a story that we could digest plasma and breathe acid. I hadn't bothered correcting that one. It was too funny watching the energy-based lifeforms desperately try to avoid me in the cafeteria. As I approached the lecture hall, I spotted my lab partner VK waiting outside. The Arxulian was probably the closest thing I had to a friend here besides ZX Vika. Unlike most species, VK actually seemed fascinated by humans rather than terrified of them, though that fascination sometimes bordered on the scientific equivalent of poking a sleeping bear with a stick. "Please tell me that whatever's in that container isn't going to cause another evacuation of the science wing," VK said by way of greeting, her tentacles gesturing toward my cargo. That was one time I protested. And again, not my fault. How was I supposed to know the ventilation system would malfunction exactly when I was demonstrating earth pepper spray? "You weren't supposed to have pepper spray in the first place. It's classified as a chemical weapon." I snorted. "Yeah, along with water and table salt. The classification system here really needs updating." Shifting the container to a more comfortable position, I added, "Don't worry, today's demonstration is completely safe. Well, mostly safe. Safe adjacent." VK's skin shifted through several worried shades of blue. "That's not reassuring." "Trust me," I said, pushing open the door to the lecture hall. "This is going to be fun." The lecture hall fell silent as I entered, which wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the heavy-duty energy shield now installed around the professor's desk. Apparently, the honey badger incident had left some lasting impressions. Professor Zakrix, our crystalline instructor, visibly dimmed as I made my way to the front of the room. I couldn't blame him. The last time I'd given a presentation, he'd had to be carefully reassembled after shattering in panic. "Ah, Ms. Martinez," he said, his voice resonating with forced calm. "I trust you've reviewed the new safety guidelines implemented after your previous demonstrations." "Absolutely, Professor," I beamed. "No carnivores, no venomous creatures, no beings capable of breaking the sound barrier, and nothing with more than 4 specialized hunting appendages." I patted my container. "This little friend meets all those criteria." The professor's crystalline structure took on a distinctly worried frequency. "And you filed all the proper paperwork?" Of course, I pulled out my holopad, displaying the forms I'd submitted. What I didn't mention was that I'd carefully worded the specimen description to be technically accurate while being vague enough to avoid raising immediate red flags. Sometimes having a lawyer for a mother came in handy. "Very well," Professor Zakrik sighed, his resignation practically visible in the way his facets dulled. "You may begin your presentation on Earth's non-lethal arthropods." I set my container on the demonstration table and faced the class. The variety of alien species before me never ceased to amaze: crystalline beings, gas-based life forms, photosynthetic entities, and even a few silicon-based organisms. All of them were now watching me with a mixture of fascination and terror. "Thank you, Professor," I began enthusiastically. "Today I'd like to discuss one of Earth's most misunderstood creatures. A being that has evolved alongside humans for millions of years, developing complex social behaviors and remarkable hunting strategies." Several students began edging toward the exits. But before I introduce our special guest, let's talk about some context. I pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's evolutionary tree. You see, Earth's arthropods have a fascinating history. They've survived multiple mass extinction events, adapted to every environment our planet has to offer, and even developed some impressive capabilities that humans have tried to replicate in our technology. I noticed K-Tal, the gaseous student, beginning to compress anxiously. "Ms. Martinez," they ventured, "when you say impressive capabilities, do you mean like that Earth insect you mentioned last semester? The one that shoots boiling chemical weapons from its posterior?" "Oh, the bombardier beetle? No, nothing like that," I laughed. "Though now that you mention it, that would make for an interesting comparison. But no, today's specimen is much more fascinating. You see, this species has existed for roughly 350 million Earth years, surviving through multiple extinction events that wiped out 90% of all other life forms." The professor's crystal structure began vibrating at a concerning frequency. "Ms. Martinez, perhaps we should." "And the really interesting part," I continued, warming to my subject, "is their hunting technique. You see, they've evolved these incredibly sophisticated methods of trapping prey. Some build elaborate silk structures that are stronger pound for pound than steel, while others actively stalk their targets using advanced problem-solving skills and depth perception that rivals some vertebrates." By this point, the exit ward migration of students had become quite noticeable. I decided it was time for the main event. But enough talk, let's meet our special guest with dramatic flair. I reached for the container's cover. "I'd like you all to meet Charlotte, a Mexican red-knee tarantula and one of Earth's most popular pet species." The chaos that erupted when I revealed Charlotte was even better than I'd anticipated. K-Tal immediately condensed into their smallest possible form, creating a small sonic boom in the process. The photosynthetic students began panic blooming, filling the air with emergency pheromones. 3 crystalline students spontaneously refracted into their component spectrums, and poor Professor Zakriks's surface developed what appeared to be error messages in at least 7 different languages. "Death dealer," someone shrieked from under a desk. "It's a class 4 death dealer." "Actually," I corrected, carefully lifting Charlotte onto my hand. "She's completely harmless to humans. We keep these as pets. Children have them in their bedrooms." The silence that followed this statement was profound enough to make a black hole seem noisy. "You," Professor Zakriks's voice came out several octaves higher than usual. "You allow your young to cohabitate with autonomous hunting entities." "Oh yeah," I enthused, letting Charlotte do her elegant walk across my arm. "They're great pets for kids. Teaching responsibility and all that. Charlotte here actually belonged to my little cousin before she upgraded to a Brazilian wandering spider." This was, of course, a complete lie. Nobody in their right mind keeps a Brazilian wandering spider as a pet, but I couldn't resist. The resulting wave of panic was absolutely worth it. "But wait until you hear about their molting process," I continued cheerfully, as several students began making emergency calls to their therapists. You see, they periodically shed their entire exoskeleton, and during this process, That's quite enough. Professor Zakrix had finally managed to reboot himself. Ms. Martinez, please secure that creature immediately. But I haven't even gotten to the part about how they digest their prey externally by. The collective screech that followed drowned out the rest of my sentence. I noticed VK had tied her tentacles in what appeared to be a sailor's knot. Sighing dramatically, I returned Charlotte to her enclosure. Fine, but you're really missing out. I had this whole presentation planned about their mating habits. Did you know the females sometimes eat the males after? No, the professor's voice cracked like splitting crystal. No more. Just return to your seat, please. As I secured Charlotte's container, I couldn't help but add, if you think this is interesting, wait until next week when I bring in my jumping spider. They have these amazing hydraulic legs that let them jump up to 50 times their body length. Professor Zakrix's crystal structure briefly displayed what looked suspiciously like a blue screen of death before he slumped onto his desk. The rest of the class passed in a blur of nervous twitches and occasional whimpers whenever I raised my hand to ask a question. By the end, I'm pretty sure half the class had signed up for emergency counseling, and the other half were filing transfer requests to less diverse institutions. As I packed up my things, VKA approached cautiously. Sarah, why are you like this? I shrugged, picking up Charlotte's container. Hey, at least I didn't bring in a cassowary. Now those are actually dangerous. They're basically modern velociraptors with anger management issues and a personal vendetta against everything that moves. What's a velociraptor? Someone whispered fearfully. I opened my mouth to answer, but Professor Zakrix, who had apparently rebooted again, cut me off with a crystal clear no that resonated through the entire building. Later that evening, as I fed Charlotte her cricket dinner in our dorm room, ZX Vika watched from what she considered a safe distance approximately the other side of the campus, via video call. So my roommate chittered nervously. How much trouble are you in? I checked my university communications panel and grinned. Well, they've implemented new guidelines specifically prohibiting all Earth-based organisms, including but not limited to arachnids, reptiles, mammals, birds, especially cassowaries, and any creature the human student Sarah Martinez finds cute or harmless. That's oddly specific. I'm taking it as a personal victory, I said, watching Charlotte delicately grasp her cricket. Besides, they only banned live specimens. They didn't say anything about holovids. Sarah, no. Sarah, yes, I pulled up my extensive collection of Earth wildlife documentaries. How do you think they'll react to learning about how honeybees cook their enemies to death by vibrating around them in a ball? Or maybe we should start with how orcas play volleyball with seals and teach their children to beach themselves to hunt. ZX Vika's image flickered as she apparently fell off whatever she was sitting on. You're going to get us all killed. Nah, I waved dismissively. Traumatized, maybe. But killed? That would require bringing in actually dangerous Earth wildlife, like geese or chihuahuas. I don't know what those are, and I don't want to know, my roommate declared firmly. I grinned, already planning my next presentation. Too late. I'm thinking of doing a whole series on Earth's most misleading creatures. Did you know we have a fish that looks completely harmless but can punch with the force of a bullet? The sound of ZX Vika disconnecting the call was drowned out by an announcement over the university's emergency system. Attention all students and faculty, due to recent events. The Xenobiology department will be implementing mandatory psychological screening before all presentations involving Earth-based subject matter. Additionally, the definition of weapon of mass destruction has been updated to include any biological entity originating from classification due 3 planets, specifically Earth. I considered this another victory and immediately began preparing my presentation on the fascinating world of cordyceps fungi. After all, they hadn't specifically banned talking about parasites yet. As I settled in for the night, Charlotte safely secured in her habitat, I couldn't help but smile at the thought of tomorrow's classes. Sure, I might have caused several cases of PTSD among the faculty and student body, but I like to think I was providing a valuable educational service. After all, if they thought a tarantula was scary, they really needed to learn about the truly dangerous creatures Earth had to offer. Besides, as the only human in a university full of aliens, I had to find my entertainment somewhere. And if that entertainment came in the form of watching my crystalline professor glitch out at the mention of spider silk, well, that's just an added bonus of being a Deathworlder. Though I did make a mental note to maybe tone it down a bit in future presentations. After all, I still needed to pass this class, and it's hard to do that if your professor keeps crashing every time you raise your hand. But that's a problem for future Sarah. Present Sarah had some honeybee documentaries to prepare, and some carefully edited Australian wildlife footage to accidentally leave playing in the background during study sessions. The next morning, I received another university communication. They were installing additional emergency exits in all classrooms where I was scheduled to give presentations, and the psychology department had officially classified Earth wildlife anxiety as a recognized condition. I printed out the notification and added it to my growing collection of achievements pinned to our dorm room wall, right next to the official warning I'd received after the honey badger incident and the petition several students had started to have Earth classified as a Class X death world. "What do you think, Charlotte?" I asked my eight-legged friend as she explored her habitat. "Should we tell them about drop bears next, or save those for the final presentation?" Charlotte continued about her business, blissfully unaware of her role in traumatizing an entire class of alien students. Just another day in the life of Earth's most enthusiastic and possibly most feared xenobiology student. Looking ahead to the rest of the semester, I couldn't help but feel excited about all the opportunities for cultural exchange that awaited. After all, someone had to prepare these aliens for the reality of Earth's wildlife, and if that someone happened to enjoy causing mass panic in the process, well, that was just an educational bonus. Besides, I had a responsibility to uphold Earth's reputation. Couldn't let the galaxy think we Deathworlders were going soft. The next day's xenobiology class brought an unexpected surprise. As I entered the lecture hall, now equipped with 3 additional emergency exits and what appeared to be a containment field generator, I noticed a new face, or rather, a new crystalline structure seated in the front row. Class Professor Za Crix announced, his facets notably steadier than yesterday. "We have a special guest today. Professor Ian Trix from the Galactic Safety Council will be observing our lectures for the next few weeks." I couldn't help but notice how the professor's gaze fixed pointedly on me. As he emphasized the words Safety Council, the new professor's crystalline structure sparkled with what I recognized as smug authority. Challenge accepted. Now, Professor Za Crix continued, "Today's topic is supposed to be symbiotic relationships in Class 1 Garden Worlds. But first, Professor Ian Trix would like to say a few words about new safety protocols." The safety inspector rose, his crystalline form catching the light in what I'm sure he thought was an impressive display of authority. "Students, recent events have brought to our attention the need for stricter guidelines regarding the discussion and presentation of potentially hazardous life forms, particularly those originating from certain planets." More pointed looks in my direction. I smiled sweetly and raised my hand. "Yes, Ms. Martinez." Professor Za Crix's voice carried a note of resigned dread. "Speaking of symbiotic relationships," I began innocently, "did you know that on Earth we have these fascinating fungi that form symbiotic relationships with ants? They're called cordyceps, and they actually take control of the ant's nervous system, and—" "That will be quite enough," Professor Ian Trix cut me off, his crystal structure vibrating with alarm. "This is exactly the sort of inappropriate topic we're trying to address." "But it's literally today's subject," I protested. "Symbiotic relationships. Okay, sure, it might end with the fungus growing out of the ant's head and spreading spores to infect the entire colony, but—" The sound of several students evacuating their waste matter storage organs interrupted my explanation. Professor Wynne Trix's surface displayed what appeared to be error messages in at least 12 different languages. Perhaps Professor Za Crix interjected hastily, "We should focus on less aggressive examples of symbiosis. Ms. Martinez, please save your Earth-based examples for never. Save them for never." I slumped back in my seat, but my mind was already working on Plan B. After all, they couldn't stop me from participating in class discussions, right? The lecture proceeded with Professor Wynne Trix discussing various appropriately peaceful examples of symbiosis from Garden Worlds. I waited patiently until he mentioned cleaning symbiosis between different species. My hand shot up again. Both professors visibly flinched. "Yes, Ms. Martinez." Professor Za Crix's voice carried the weight of someone who knew exactly what was coming but was powerless to stop it. "Oh, I just wanted to share a relevant Earth example," I said brightly. "We have these little fish called cleaner wrasse that have a symbiotic relationship with larger fish. They clean parasites off the bigger fish's teeth and—" "That sounds surprisingly peaceful," Professor Yin Trix remarked, relaxing slightly. "And sometimes they get eaten anyway because, nature is metal," I finished cheerfully. Oh, and speaking of metal, we also have these birds called oxpeckers that clean parasites off large mammals, but sometimes they actually create wounds and drink their blood instead. Isn't nature fascinating? The safety inspector's crystalline structure began to develop what looked suspiciously like stress fractures. And don't even get me started on the symbiotic relationship between wolverines and ravens. The ravens help wolverines find prey, and in return, the wolverines. Well, let's just say it's a very efficient system for redistributing biomass across the ecosystem. Class dismissed. Professor Zakrix announced frantically, despite there being 40 minutes left in the lecture. Everyone out. Especially you, Ms. Martinez. As the classroom emptied faster than a ship with a hull breach, I caught up with VKA in the hallway. My Arxulian friend had somehow managed to tie her tentacles into what appeared to be a DNA double helix from stress. Sarah, she said, carefully untangling herself, I've been meaning to ask. Why exactly did you choose to study xenobiology? I grinned. Well, I figured if I'm going to terrify aliens with stories about Earth's wildlife, I might as well get academic credit for it. Because skin cycled through several worried shades of blue. You know they're installing panic buttons in all your classrooms now, right? Really, I beamed. That's so thoughtful. Although they might want to reconsider the button design after I tell them about the Brazilian wandering spider's habit of hiding in banana clusters. Did you know they're attracted to yellow? My friend's tentacles began to retie themselves. Please stop. Never. Besides, I haven't even started on my presentation about Australia yet. Did you know we have a tree there that's so poisonous horses die just from standing in its shade? And don't even get me started on the platypus. Now there's a creature that proves evolution has a sense of humor. As we walked to our next class, I couldn't help but notice that the hallway cleared even faster than usual. Apparently, word about my educational contributions was spreading. That evening, I received another university communication. They were now requiring all Earth-related presentations to be submitted for review by a panel of psychologists and safety experts at least 2 weeks in advance. Additionally, they had added discussing Earth's ecological systems to the list of activities requiring a hazard warning and signed waivers from all participants. I pinned this new notice to my wall of achievements right next to the memo banning me from the biology department's safe species showcase after I suggested including a slow loris. Apparently, the fact that something cute could be venomous was too much for some people to handle. You know what, Charlotte, I said, watching my 8-legged friend catch her evening cricket, I think we're really making progress here. Soon they'll be ready for the really interesting stuff like how bears can smell fear, or how moose can dive up to 20 feet underwater to eat plants. Charlotte continued her dinner, unconcerned with her role as Earth's arachnid ambassador to the stars. The next morning I arrived at class to find a new addition to the classroom, a large warning sign that read, "Caution, Earth-based discussions may occur in this room. Proceed at your own risk." I considered this my greatest achievement yet. To be continued in Sarah's next presentation, Why Australia's Most Adorable Animals Are Trying to Kill You, a comprehensive guide to surviving hugs from koalas. Note: the Galactic Federation University of Natural Sciences would like to remind all students that emotional support drones are available 24/7 for anyone traumatized by Earth-related educational content. Please note that these drones have been specially programmed to avoid yellow colors and sudden movements for reasons we'd rather not discuss. Additional note: no aliens were permanently harmed in the making of this story. The same cannot be said for their peace of mind, their understanding of what constitutes a pet, or their ability to look at spiders the same way ever again.